What's going on, guys? My name is Wade with Tech Daily. So I've been fortunate enough to have my Pixel 4a for the last couple of weeks now. And while it's no secret that this phone was pretty late to the game in 2020, I think what we did end up with for this phone is one of, if not the best, budget devices of the year. And in this video, I'm gonna go over why I think this phone is so good, a couple of the aspects that maybe could have been done better, and everything else you need to know about the Pixel 4a. Right off the bat, the first thing the Pixel 4a does better than any other phone in its price range, and this should come as no surprise, is offer an unparalleled user experience. What I want to make clear though is that the Pixel 4a is the best optimized phone, the best Android software experience. It's not necessarily the best phone in regards to performance, if you're looking only at its internal specs. Inside, the Pixel 4a is powered by the Snapdragon 730G chipset, which I think given how late in the year it is, some people probably hoped for a bit more powerful of a chipset. And yes, you can get a couple-year-old flagship smartphone with an 800 series Snapdragon chipset for not a whole lot of money nowadays too. On the other hand, with 6GB of RAM, I think that's more than enough to power through anything you want this phone to do. And with 128 gigs of internal storage, there's plenty of room for apps, pictures, and everything in between. But another miss here is not offering SD card expansion. So on the hardware side, we've got some pros and cons, but when you actually use this phone and look past the actual specs on paper, it's easy to see why the Pixel devices have such a dedicated hardcore fan base that often praises the user experience over anything else. This is a smooth, fluid, fast-feeling phone. It's Google's OS on Google's own device after all, and the effort they put into optimizing the user experience is something a lot of people can appreciate. There's no fluff, there's no excuses, it's just a seamless and simple Android experience that feels fast. And while yes, some other smartphone manufacturers have greatly improved how they do Android, like Samsung for example, it still doesn't compete to tapping and touching your way through a Pixel device. If you like your phone to feel snappy and responsive, if you like a simple, straightforward Android experience, if you like having multiple years of software updates, and getting those newest Android releases before anyone else, then those are all good enough reasons to consider the Pixel 4a. And going beyond the Android experience, I think if you do want to use this phone a little more, with gaming for example, you can do that too. I think there's enough to work with. And like I said, there isn't anything this phone can't do. There aren't any performance issues, there aren't any load time holdups or snags in launching apps, and the 6 gigs of RAM is enough to keep most apps refreshed and current in the background. You aren't going to be disappointed with any aspect of performance here, I don't think. This is a phone that simply offers everything and then some. Also, just as a note, battery life on this phone is really pretty strong. The 3140 milliamp capacity doesn't sound like much, but Google made it a point to mention their increased efforts in usage optimization with the 4a to hopefully yield as much battery life as possible. And I think their focus here paid off. This is a phone that easily makes it through the day for me with more than 7 hours of screen on time. I know everyone is going to use this phone differently. I don't necessarily push my devices all that hard during the day, but I personally thought battery life on the 4a was particularly good. And paired with the included 18-watt fast charger, you can juice up 50% in just over 30 minutes. So that's super helpful too. The second big thing the Pixel 4a does better than any other phone in its price range is of course offer a fantastic camera for picture taking. Once again, if you're just looking to compare hardware specs, it would seem as though the 4a isn't up to par. You get one single rear lens around back, which is a 12.2 megapixel shooter, and an 8 megapixel selfie lens up front, with even some budget phones offering 3 or 4 lenses now and pushing some 64 megapixels. The 4a doesn't seem like it offers the same stuff, but Google's focus has always been more on the camera software with image processing, and that's what's made them the leader in smartphone photography for at least the last couple of years. While it is true that you might miss out on potentially useful extra lenses like the wide angle or telephoto, Google also doesn't offer any gimmicky lenses like a macro lens, which you'll probably never take pictures with anyway. The shooting modes you do get, including the incredible night sight lens, the best portrait shooting in the business, Google Lens, 4K video, and some extra stabilization options, that's all genuinely useful stuff that the Pixel 4a does really, really well. Now, I will admit that Google's picture profile isn't for everyone. You get a more realistic, true-to-life looking image with the exposure and the colors that might seem a little dull in certain situations. But rather than going overboard with a bright, saturated look that sometimes appears overdone, you're presented with the actual scene as it is, and you can always make some adjustments afterwards. The detail captured in a lot of these pictures is great. The portrait pictures in particular, like I said, are the best in the business. Its video capabilities, I think, still fall a little short compared to the iPhone. Same with the selfie camera. I think the iPhone can take better selfie pictures at times, but if picture taking is something you really and truly value, there's nothing better in this price range overall. Pixel devices are known for the incredible camera capabilities, and the 4a is no exception. The third reason why I think the Pixel 4a is going to be so enticing for a lot of people, and this might be a little controversial, is its size. It's no secret that smartphones have gotten big, like really, really big, and in some sense that's good. Having such a big screen to watch your content on is great, but for people who want small, compact phones that fit comfortably in a pocket and can be used easily with one hand, there's not a lot of options out there. And this Pixel 4a, I think, is going to be the phone that fills that demand. At just over 5.8 inches, it's small by 2020 standards, but I think it's the right balance. It's easy to tap and touch your way through the phone with just your thumb. You can reach every side and every corner pretty easily, but Google also went with a relatively new design for them that maximizes the screen real estate. You get a corner-to-corner display, minimal bezels, no notch, and a very modern design that I think does look great. In my time using this phone, I initially thought the device did feel kind of small, but I very quickly came to like the size after a while. Now, the actual display itself isn't really special. It's a pretty good looking OLED panel at a resolution of 2340 by 1080 that packs in around 443 pixels per inch. It's crisp, it's sharp, it's very colorful, but it's no high refresh rate panel, it's no AMOLED, it's nothing new either. It's probably the bare minimum for a phone like this at this price range, but it still offers a great viewing experience nonetheless. Like I said, I know not everyone will appreciate the small form factor of the Pixel 4a, but there's going to be a ton of people who do. And in my opinion, a phone at this size, considering everything else on the market, offers more positives for a specific group of people than any inherent negatives. And since we're on the topic of its physical form factor, let me just touch on a couple other things. The Pixel 4a is made of all plastic. This sort of soft touch matte finish is nice. I think I liked it a little more out of the box though. Now that I've handled it, I notice it attracts more smudges and fingerprints than I initially thought. So I don't mind the all plastic here. I think it still looks pretty good and it doesn't feel cheap at all. But this all is just a matter of personal preference. Other companies make their plastic budget devices look nice with shiny polished backs, bright colors, and chrome accents, all of which are still plastic after all. And that's fine too. Some people might prefer that. There's nothing wrong with this choice though from Google. It's just a different approach. And taking a look around the device, it doesn't really lack anything important either, which is good. There's thick tactile buttons with a little color accent. There's a headphone jack, which is great to see. And there's dual stereo speakers on this phone, which I personally think sound great. It's not all that often that you do get that kind of speaker setup on a phone with this price tag. And here's a quick sample so you can get an idea of what it'll sound like. No, this phone doesn't have wireless charging, but that's fine. I personally don't really care for wireless charging or even use it anyway. And no, this phone doesn't have an IP or water resistance rating, which might be the thing I do miss most, but not a lot of other budget devices offer either of those features anyway, and that's just a product of this plastic build. Also, around back, there's the good old physical rear-mounted fingerprint sensor. This, again, I think is going to depend on what you personally think, but I like like the rear sensor. I think the setup works well, it's fast, it's accurate, it's placed in the perfect spot, and it's a better choice than an in-display reader altogether, at least in my opinion. Missing Face Unlock is a little bit of a bummer, but how good the fingerprint sensor is around back I think does make up for that. So there you go. Those are all the reasons why I think this Pixel 4a is one of the best budget devices that's being offered right now. But hopefully you guys did enjoy this video, and I'll see you guys later.